Welcome in. It is the Tuesday edition of Big Ten Today. Dave Revson, Dave Wanstedt, Joshua Perry, and if it is Tuesday, which I've already confirmed it is.
Is it?
Yes. We're talking CFP.
Okay.
You ready to talk CFP?
Always, absolutely. This time of year for sure. I got a team that I'm going to throw in there and stir it up a little bit.
Really?
I think I'm a little more ready than coaches. He's I don't know where he's going.
You are ready to stir it up?
I don't know why
I'm going to wait
this.
till the block to talk about it, but I have one.
Okay. You got a little something up your sleeve.
I do.
I can see it right there.
I do.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Let's get into our big story later today. Get a new set of rankings form largely held at the top last week. Top 5 all winners, Ohio State and Michigan, both cruising. TCU won at Texas, so they remain among the 4 unbeatens. Oregon was the highest ranked team to lose. UCLA fell as well, meaning USC is likely the Pac-12's last remaining hope. Let's dive into the Big Ten teams first. And Ohio State really cruised in its game. And I know the Cameron Babb story really grabbed you. So before we get into the Buckeyes' big picture, that was something that really stood out.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I thought that was the highlight of the weekend for me. I mean, nationally, really. I mean, and not just football. Yes, it was a great inspiration for Cameron and Ohio State, coming off the injury, scoring a touchdown. But I think for all sports and for all kids to see that, really, it doesn't matter what sport you play, and just see how just sticking with it and just fortitude and having success. I just thought it was a fantastic story. I really did.
Yeah, and I talked to Jake Butt over the weekend about it because he was a guy who had, I believe, 3 ACL tears as a player, and just mentally what you go through in that situation and how to bounce back. And it's very uncommon. But the thing that stands out about Cameron Babb is the fact that he's been a multiple-time captain at Ohio State, and also he's wearing that Black O jersey, which is, goes to a leader, somebody who's well-respected in that program. And it's hard to be a leader when you're dealing with personal stuff, especially back-to-back injuries. And so I think it really shows, first off, the character of Cameron Babb, but also it's one of the great stories in college football. I agree with you, and it's why we all enjoy watching the sport every weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And unless you're playing them, it's a lot of fun to watch Ohio State in general. It felt like we had some questions about them coming out of the Northwestern game. Would you say, in your mind, they answered those questions, Joshua, going over 300 yards rushing and passing?
Yeah, kind of. I think so. And Indiana is not to take anything away from them, but Ohio State should be able to go out and have that type of performance against an Indiana team. To me, it's about consistency in terms of running the football. One of the things that I did notice is just philosophically, it looked like guys were able to move people off the line of scrimmage a little bit more. And that offense, especially when Mayan Williams was in there, is better when it's going downhill. But speaking of Mayan, it gets to this idea of running back health for Ohio State, and that's probably going to be the biggest question down the stretch because Trevion Henderson didn't play in that game. Mayan Williams gets banged up. You're down to Dallin Hayden, who's a third-string freshman. They've got Xavier Johnson in there, who is a former walk-on wide receiver, cornerback, kick returner, running the football. That's a really difficult spot. And so as much as it's about consistency and really moving people off the line of scrimmage, the health of the running backs is going to be key as Ohio State makes it into this final 2-week stretch.
Yeah, I'm going to just play off of what you talked about, running the football. I mean, because that's been the whole topic, really, starting with Ryan Day. Last year, Michigan physicality, Notre Dame, on and on and on. And looking at this close, I mean, this week, they may have really fallen into something. You mentioned you saw the big guys coming off the ball. Generally, they're an outside zone team. They only ran the outside zone 13 times. 27 times they ran inside the tackles, big man on big man, and just moving guys off. 27 times for 9 yards a carry. So when Ryan Day looks at this, he may say, you know what, guys? The zone stuff is great, and we got some nice play action pass off of this, on and on. But I'll tell you what, when we need to make a first down at the end of the game against whoever, this could be our answer and the way to go in the future.
It's what we said a week ago, though. I mean, we talked about the outside zone scheme as much as they have done it. I think this Ohio State offense is better when they can get some man blocks and really allow those big bodies up front to push people off the line of scrimmage. And so there is something to the tape about the success when they can do that. But again, it's consistency, though. You did it one time. Can you replicate that performance again? And then can you build off of that again? And that's what we need to see.
Well, I guess the big question to me would be, can you do it against Michigan?
Yep.
I mean, it's one thing. And again, all due respect to Indiana, but it's one thing to do it against Indiana. It's wholly another to do it against Michigan. And I think when we look at why it went wrong last year in that game, the inability to run the ball when they needed to run the ball was a big part of it. Certainly they are in good position here, outscoring their opponents by better than 31 points per game. They are first in the nation in that category. Number 2 in that category is Michigan. The Wolverines also pummeling people, including Nebraska this week. Where are you on Michigan, Coach, as they head into their battle with Illinois?
Well, I'm going to say the positives first, and we all know the defense and all the numbers. But when you look close at this defense, this is what really gets my attention. Is you got a new defensive coordinator, and I've been around those teams where a new guy comes in and he tweaks this, and the communication just isn't as good with the players and so forth. And we lost, technically, I'm going to say 3 first-round draft picks. Mm-hmm. We know about Hutchinson, we know about Dak Hill, but David Ojabo, I mean, he would have been a first-round pick if he's healthy. Yeah. Right. So not only are you're losing your coordinator, you're losing not just talent, but as good a talent as there is in the NFL, in college football. And then you're losing the leadership that goes with the Hutchinsons of the world and Dak Hill. So that's a lot to lose, and to be performing at the level that they are with this group. We can talk about the running game and Blake, but this is, to me, the storyline of Michigan and their great success this year.
I'm totally with you. And after we watched them all the way back in training camp, I left there saying this is going to be a good defensive unit. I thought that they had the pieces to replace some of the production that they had lost. It was just about what their top end can be. And we're seeing right now, just in terms of the negative plays that they can create, TFLs and sacks, their top end is as good as anybody in the country right now. And that's been huge. I think if we're going to be critical of this defense, the question, and we didn't get it answered against Nebraska, is the one-on-one passing game with those defensive backs. Can they hold up in coverage against a guy like a Marvin Harrison Jr.? That's going to be the big question, because they've done a great job of everything else. Those guys, when they have zone eyes, they can take the football away. They get good hits on wide receivers and tight ends and underneath coverage. A group, again, who gets a lot of pressure on the quarterback. But if you get that one-on-one shot, can your guys hold up, is going to be the question. And then the flip side of it, offensively, it is a work of art watching this football team run the ball. Just consistency all day long. And I mentioned this on Saturday. Blake Corum didn't have any super long runs, but he was just consistent for 6 or 7 or whatever it was a carry all day long. And that's the thing that hurts opposing football teams, is when he can be efficient like that, and specifically on first down. If you know your running back's going to go out there and get 7 yards every first down, who doesn't want to be a play caller when it's 2nd and 3?
Sure.
Everybody in America wants to call plays from that position, and that's why this offense has been so successful.
You know what? Staying with the offense, I was looking this morning, actually, and, watching the final drive and stuff, Jerry made a comment about JJ, the passing game. Where is the passing game, and how good can it be with Michigan going down the road? So now I'm saying to myself, we know they can run the ball. Let's assume that they're in the playoffs and they got to play Georgia. This is I'm making the point that the passing game, to me, is the only question about this Michigan team. Not that they can't do it, but they haven't had to do it. But Georgia's given up 3 rushing touchdowns all year, folks. Yeah. So if you're lining up with Georgia tomorrow and it's going to be Blake Corum and here we come, at some point, something's going to have to give. You know what I mean? So that's I'm not giving it a negative. I love Michigan, but I think that's, if it was a question mark, that's the one thing that, depending, if you're playing Georgia, you're going to have to throw the ball.
We're in nitpick mode. We're in nitpick mode a little bit with Ohio State. You're in nitpick mode as well with Michigan. JJ was 0 of 5, passes 20 yards or longer downfield. He's at 30% passes 20 yards or longer downfield this year. That's 10th in the Big Ten. How big an issue is that?
Well, I mean, it's a huge issue because if you do come up against a defense that is efficient on first downs and your yards per carry are down, like you have to be able to loosen them up one way or another. And especially if that means that teams are going to start bringing that extra safety in the box, knowing that you haven't challenged downfield, that's a problem. And it all goes back to the game at the end of the year, right? Ohio State, Michigan. One of the places where I think Ohio State has been tested this year, and it's been 50-50, it's been really iffy, is on their corners. I think that they can be challenged in one-on-one situations, much like Michigan's defense has too. But if you can't throw it down the football field, that's where you lose an opportunity where maybe you had an edge in that game specifically. So as I look at this, it's something that they need to continue to work on. They tried to do it against Nebraska, and I get that the ball's wet. And it certainly wasn't the conditions that you want to have to go out there and work on that. But if you're going to win a national title, in my opinion, you need to have the ability to take the top off the defense.
So again, both these teams figure to hold their spots this week, whether for some reason just to flip-flop them or whatever. The committee does that. Who knows? But nothing at all that happened this past week leads us to believe that Ohio State or Michigan would fall in any way in that top four of the CFP, which comes out tonight. Interested to get both of your thoughts on where you see this. Joshua, let's start with you. Give us your top six.
Yeah, so top six, number one, Georgia, and they've been consistent all year long. Number two, Ohio State, and number three, Michigan. And I think that we're all confident that those two teams will be at that spot. I've got TCU in there at the 4 spot. People challenge the way that they have won games, but they're undefeated, and that's very important. Tennessee's in there at that 5 spot. And then I've got LSU 8-2 at the 6 spot. And I was not happy with LSU being the highest ranked 2-loss team when the initial CFP rankings came out. But these last few weeks, they have really proven, even like this past weekend, it was an ugly game.
Yep.
It was gritty, and they won it on their defense. Like, they've proven to me that they're a pretty good team.
How about you, Wani?
Well, I'm gonna same. I did make a little switch here from my last week. You know, Georgia number 1 is the same, but I moved Ohio State up to number 2, and the thinking behind it, real quick, was that Ohio State showed me that we know they can throw the ball. Put that aside, okay? But they came out and ran the ball and did a little bit different what we talked about in the beginning of the show. So, you know, Michigan is number 3 because just what we talked about earlier, the long down the field passing game. I just see Ohio State being a little bit more complete now as an offense. And then I got TCU. That was a heck of a win. TCU, I watched every play of that game later, and they out-physical Texas. Mm-hmm. And that's the 5th team that they beat, ranked team. And then here we go, number 5, USC.
Oh, Wani.
And wait a minute, they're going to be in the Big Ten. We got to start giving them a little bit of love.
Our new best friends.
And, right there, our new best friends, Rever.
Yeah.
And wait, the USC right now, they got UCLA. They get a chance to beat 3 ranked teams.
Who are they? Who have they
USC,
beaten up to this point, though, is the question.
I'm talking future.
Oh, you're talking future. You're forecasting.
They're not
with
in
your
the Big
rankings.
Ten right now, but they're going to be.
Here
So
we go.
I'm looking at that they're part of this
He's
thing.
forecasting.
And so I'm going UCLA, and let's just say it's Notre Dame next, and then it's Utah. They get a chance to beat 3 ranked teams. They get in.
They already lost to Utah earlier this year. They don't have a good strength of schedule.
Okay.
They're going to lose to Notre Dame. I'm calling that right here, right now.
Well, you go
on this
ahead.
show.
I'm still like them.
Wani, this is why Jerry doesn't like the committee.
I still like them.
Because of this.
I would have them right there.
Oh, my gosh.
You
It's not a great defensive
You
team.
guys better start liking USC.
USC
a little bit,
is
okay?
great.
I'm
I
telling
can't sign me up for the first trip out to
Absolutely.
I'm on the first plane out there, but you know, where do they, whether or not they belong there in the CFP. We'll see. But to your point, were they to win those games, they would have a very compelling case. Because at some point, I mean, by definition, Ohio State or Michigan, one of them is going to lose. So the most we could end up with is 3 undefeated teams. There's going to be this battle with 1-loss teams, perhaps 2-loss teams, if LSU goes and wins the SEC championship. Right. So, yeah, I mean, if they win those games, great. I think what Joshua was saying, he's not convinced they're going to win those games.
You guys know who Jordan Addison is? You ever hear of him?
Pretty good, yeah.
Pitt,
I know, I was gonna
Biletnikoff
say,
award.
I was
He's at
gonna
USC now, too. Put him in the
I can't
mix.
believe you're singing his praises after
He caught one,
defected.
Coach. He caught 1 pass last week for 2 yards. For 2 yards. I did check that this morning.
Make the quick case on LSU.
Well, I mean, it's a team to me, and I was out on them because, you know, 2 losses, didn't think that they had really proven anything with a couple of their wins. These last couple weeks, Alabama, the grit and the guts to go out there on the 2-point conversion. You get the win in that game. And then they're playing Arkansas. It's a nasty game.
Yeah,
it's one of those maturity games. And like I said, they won it on their defense. They've got some good wins too. High quality wins out there. So that to me is why they deserve to be up there in the top 6, especially with what's happened around them. And then you start to go back to lose Florida State early on in the year, coach first game, the whole deal. Florida State's a pretty good team right now.
Yeah.
You start making the excuses for them a little bit too.
Tennessee's blocking them though.
Yes.
For now,
yes.
Right? And Tennessee will not play in the SEC championship game, obviously,
right,
because it's going to be Georgia. And so we're LSU to beat Georgia. Do you think they jump Tennessee, which beat them soundly? I mean, that to me is where it gets really
absolutely.
That's where it gets really interesting,
yeah,
because then the committee has this notion of, well, they're a conference champ,
right,
and we're supposed to reward
yep,
conference champs.
Well, we've seen this kind of situation with the conference champ that's got a couple of losses before. Let's see if it's any different this time.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
With Penn State.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. What a moment. Our big stat, that was the go-ahead goal in Rutgers' first ever men's Big Ten title in any sport as the Scarlet Knights soccer team took down 8-time national champ Indiana 3-1 on Sunday to clinch an NCAA tourney spot, their first in 7 years. One of 4 Big Ten teams that got in. They will face Penn on Thursday, which gets us to our big interview. Head coach Jim McElderry joining us. And Coach, let's start with Sunday. That game was incredible. That scene was incredible. You had more than 4,000 fans on hand. You were playing at home. You're playing against a perennial powerhouse in Indiana. What did it mean for your program to get that win in the fashion that you did?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And yeah, playing against Indiana, really probably the gold standard of college soccer programs with all their national championships. So we knew it would be a tough match, but I think I give our coaches in our conference a lot of credit in that, we made a decision to play at the better seed was home throughout the conference tournament. And I think you could see from the crowd there, we were lucky enough to be playing at home, but it really created a great college soccer environment, having 4,000 fans there. From the majority of them rooting for us, which was obviously helpful. But I think even, prior to the match, Todd Yeagley, their coach, and I talked about it briefly, how it really helps the experience for the players and makes it feel special. And we were lucky enough to win the game and be able to celebrate it with all of our families and friends and really kind of soak it all in was something special.
Tell me about that goal from Ula there, direct off the corner, an Olympico goal, as it is referred to in soccer. What was going through your mind as it's bending through the air there towards the corner?
In the first half, they scored a goal, not exactly the same, but on a corner kick that was, the wind aided, kind of took it right at our goal. And it was really difficult. And we talked about it at halftime. It was so hard for the goalkeepers. Now, I didn't direct Ula to kind of score from the corner, but we did say, hey, just kind of keep it on target and try to see if you can put some pressure on their goalkeeper. And we were lucky enough to have it go in. And, Ula played it off nicely that he planned on scoring that goal and flipping after. So it was a great moment, and it was an important goal in the game. Obviously, the game was still tied, so we felt it was an important, moment to score a goal and to now put all the pressure back on them, and it ended up working out for us.
It did indeed. Coach, it's your 4th season. How did you get Rutgers to this point? I mean, they had won 2 Big Ten games in the 3 years before you got there. It is a very good program historically. It had not been a good program recently. You had spent the previous 16 years at Fordham really building up that program. What was the blueprint for Rutgers to get to this moment?
I think when I was at Fordham, we used to say that our team should be, half of the team should be from the tri-state area, maybe a quarter international and a quarter from around the country. And when we got to Rutgers, being someone who grew up in New Jersey, I know how talented players are here. I knew there was a ton of talent that would want to stay home if we really recruited the right kids and put the time in. So we said, hey, instead of it being, from the tri-state area, hey, we need half our team at least from New Jersey, if not more. And then, a quarter, maybe some international players, which we don't really even have that many. And then a quarter from elsewhere. And we have some kids from Portland. We have Pennsylvania, New York. So we have some kids from outside New Jersey, but we really felt the core of our team should be coming from New Jersey. And as you've seen, we had 2 of the 3 goalkeepers are from New Jersey in the final, and we've had a lot of really important players from us join us here and be part of this project. So we're lucky. We're in a state that they love living in New Jersey, and there's a lot of soccer talent. So we just got to keep recruiting them and showing them what an awesome place Rutgers is to go to school and to play soccer.
Okay, that being said, what about the international players? I mean, so Ula's from Norway. You've got players from France and Spain and Ghana on your roster. Are you making home visits to Norway and Ghana? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, well, no to Ghana, but we did see Ula in Norway, and we also Pablo is a senior now. He's actually in graduate school. We'll get a graduate degree in December, so he'll finish here with an undergrad from Rutgers and a graduate degree from Rutgers. Amazing kind of student athlete in Spain, and we did see him play over there. And then Hugo Le Guenic is from France, and my first recruiting cycle was traveling around a lot, and he was a great fit for us. So it's been interesting. Once COVID hit, it even had us concentrate more on the local players because we weren't traveling, and it was too big of a risk to have players come here that maybe we couldn't see in person. So Ula, I mean, the COVID was a kind of a double-edged sword. It was a very difficult time for everybody, but at the same time, we kind of reinvested our time in kids from New Jersey who we knew really well. And you look at guys like Joey Zielinski and Matty Acosta, et cetera. There's a bunch of great players from this area that have joined us here.
You played at Fairfield. You grew up in New Jersey, played professionally in the tri-state area as well. What made you make that transition from playing to coaching?
It's interesting. I was one of those guys. I didn't think a lot about coaching until I graduated from college, and I did continue on playing, but I wasn't making a great living doing it. So I was back at graduate school at Fairfield and kind of volunteering my time for the first couple of months, and then ended up getting that kind of, that bug to try to help players. And I really enjoyed being on the field. And it's a transition. You first, I think, get on the field, and that's the transition from playing to coaching, and you love being around the players. You're young, and then you start learning the craft a little bit. The head coach who's still at Fairfield now, Carl Reese, who had come from Hartwick College and had a good coaching career there and playing career there, started to teach me about the recruiting and building teams and culture. So those were things that I ended up bringing to Fordham. And then you start kind of getting your own thoughts on things and how you want your team to look. But yeah, I think it's funny. It wasn't really until I graduated from college that I thought about coaching. Before, it was all just about playing, and I love the game. So it's been a fun transition, and I still have a lot to learn. It's constantly changing, this game, and it's one of the things I love about it.
Well, it's interesting in that you grew up in New Jersey, so you were talking about keeping the talent home, and that's obviously been a focus for you. And as you say, your roster really is littered with players from New Jersey. And you grew up going to Rutgers games when they really had it going. I mean, 13 NCAA tourneys in the 80s and 90s. What can this program be? I mean, I know you don't see this as like the last step. This is kind of a first big step here in your 4th year. But what's your vision for what Rutgers can be here going forward?
When you take the job and you're recruiting and you're trying to tell kids where you see the program, and I see this program being where it was in the late 80s and early 90s. It's a different game. There's the professional game now, and some kids are skipping college and going right to the pros. But if you look at what Pat Hobbs and his staff here, what they've invested in the buildings here, our training facility, our stadium, this is a great little bridge between someone graduating from high school and maybe needing more time and wanting to earn a degree. I just feel that there's so much talent in New Jersey. We have so much to offer in our location. We're very lucky. We don't take that for granted, but I don't think there's any reason that we should be a program that doesn't see ourselves with the best programs in the country. Now, we know there's a lot of excellent places to go to school and some great programs, but we feel we should be in the mix with those. And some of the players that have decided to join us here, I think, has proven that some great players, whether they're local or from Portland or from Spain, see the same things we see, and they can come here and earn a top-class degree, but also have a real soccer culture and what we offer training and the facilities. And it's something that I think if you asked our players, they know they're treated really well. They feel that they're lucky. They don't take it for granted. And, we feel that you can come here and while earning a degree, get better as a player. And the sky's the limit for us as a program.
Coach, last question. Give me a quick thumbnail here on Penn. That's your first round opponent. Been a while since they've been in the NCAA tournament as well. What can we expect here coming up later this week?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough match. They've had a great season. The Ivy League is very strong this year, and they won the Ivy League. Coach Bill's done an excellent job. We played them my first and second years here, kind of a home and away, and the games were really tight. They have a lot of older players. I think some of their older players have invested in staying in the Ivy League for their COVID year, which is impressive that they've committed themselves to doing that. They play a nice brand of soccer similar to us. So I think it's going to be a really good soccer game. Hopefully it's not too cold for all the fans, but I do think it's going to be an attractive game. I think there'll be goals in the game. But for us, it's now just about recovering from the Big Ten championship weekend and trying to get our legs back underneath us. But we're really excited to be in the tournament. And as you say, you kind of got to be in it to win it. So we're just happy to kind of be in the bracket and keep our season going. And we feel lucky that we're allowed to be around these players and train for another couple, at least another week.
Well, congratulations to you, Coach. Really a great story, and best of luck here going forward. Hope you guys make a deep run.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Four-way tie atop the Big Ten West with 2 weeks to go. 5 teams still technically alive for the title. Everyone other than Nebraska and Northwestern got thrown into chaos, of course, this past weekend when Purdue took down Illinois. So who will ultimately get to Indy? The most important thing to know is that no one controls its own destiny. Iowa has a fairly clear path. They need to beat Minnesota and Nebraska and hope for an Illinois loss. And remember, the Illini have Michigan this week. Purdue also with a strong chance. Were Iowa to lose one of those games, the Boilers would go simply by beating Northwestern and Indiana. So they certainly have a favorable schedule. Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin still technically in it. Badgers are far and away the longest shot. So let's dive in. Let's start with Illinois. Technically still in it, but it's going to be tough here given what they need to have happen to get in. Disappointing when you think, Wani, that a couple weeks ago they were very much in control. And even last week, all they needed to do was beat Purdue and Northwestern. They would have been in, and now they're kind of behind the 8 ball. But, man, there's still a lot of positives going on there. So what do you do here? How do you kind of circle the wagons?
Yeah, that's I mean, this is a frustrating one because they really, even though they lost the game to Purdue, and Purdue made more plays than they didn't play a horrible game, in my opinion. It wasn't one of those 5 fumbles on the ground and 4 interceptions. Yeah. I mean, guys running wide open. That was not the type of ball game it was. I mean, Purdue just made more plays. The first thought, I got 3 things real quick. Chase Brown, we don't know, the encouraging news, right? You said it's...
Yeah, Brett Bielema said trending in the right direction was the quote yesterday, so
whether he plays or not, the key here would be don't let that become a distraction. You don't want that to be in the locker room, the conversation. How's Chase? Is he going to be all right? Is he going to do that? And all of a sudden, it's Friday, it's Saturday, and we got to line up and play Michigan. I mean, so that would be the first thing. Brent, don't let it become the second thing is the penalties, and we haven't seen that. We saw it in the opening game against Indiana when they lost, and they've really been really good. And they're just not the team. I mean, Bielema said it at his press conference. We're not the team that can get behind the sticks, and all of a sudden 3rd and long, now put it on Tommy DeVito, and we got to make all these plays in the passing game. That's not who we are. It's not our identity. And that's what happened in the game, right? The penalties. And then the third part, I mentioned the defense. I mean, every touchdown that they threw, whether it was Weatherspoon or whether it was Martin, they had guys right there to make the play. And that even hurts more because it wasn't like Illinois got tricked, right. Or Purdue did something that, we couldn't. I mean, they had guys there, and they went up and got the plays and put the officiating aside, but just Purdue made more plays than they did. That is not what Illinois is. It's got to be so frustrating for Brett Bielema and the whole team.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the defensive thing, both you and I are defensive guys. Like, to be in position and the guy just still makes a play, like, you got to pat him on the back, but it happens so many times in a game that it is absolutely frustrating. Totally agree there. But you mentioned getting behind the sticks. In Rever, we had a conversation talking about this Illinois offense and their downfield passing attack. And you had asked me the question of why. And I said part of it was separation, but the other part of it is the offensive line and their ability to pass protect long enough to get those routes developed down the field. And we saw what happened when they had to drop back and try to throw the ball down the field. Tommy DeVito was not in a position to where he could just sit and wait and let those routes develop. And so I think that is now the next step in terms of evolution for this offense, is to keep bringing those guys along, because that offensive line, to me, is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was a year ago. That is their next step, is to be able to create a little extra time so now this offense can evolve to where they can drop back and really throw it.
And if you can't do that against Purdue, you're going to have a hard time doing it against Michigan
Yeah.
with a really good pass rush that the Wolverines have. Purdue's been really up and down, but now really good chance to get to Indy, guys. What do you make of Purdue as we kind of head down the home stretch here?
This is the most shocking thing, right? You know, it's like I am shocked that they're still in position to do this, but I'm not shocked because at their top end, they're a very good football team. And their path right now, too, is the biggest thing. Was it Northwestern and Indiana?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, you better win both those games.
You better win it, but that's the thing you cannot count on with this Purdue team this year, is what type of performance you're going to get. But to go back to what you were saying, in this game, I thought that there were many moments that this Purdue team looked different than they had before, because some of those 50-50 plays that they got, they didn't get in other games. And I mentioned this on the final drive, but I believe it was the second touchdown to Payne Durham. Aiden O'Connell is standing in there, and against Iowa, he did not stand in the pocket, wouldn't set his feet, was scared to let the pressure get up on him. He stood in there, took a helmet right in the chest, delivered an accurate ball that went for a touchdown. Like, that's the difference. And when Purdue's playing like that, they're a really good football team.
Yeah, and Purdue's defense, I think Jeff Brom said it after the game. You know, we played hard and we were in the right spots. I mean, that's who they are. They're very average at best as far as statistically, you know, in the Big Ten. A lot of teams, everyone talks about we got to run the ball and then hit some big passes. Purdue is opposite of that. You know, they throw the ball to set up the run, and that's okay. But I would just say, Jeff Brom, don't forget about the run. You know what I mean? That is part of it when they're balanced. And I don't care what you do first, but when you're balanced like they were, close to being balanced, Purdue's got a chance to beat anybody.
Particularly since the run game's been so much better. I mean, they've now had a 100-yard rusher 5 of the last 7 games.
Crazy legs.
Yesterday, they won 17 straight games without one. That Crazy Legs Maccabee. It's really an incredible story.
It is incredible.
It's been great. And again, Northwestern this week, Cats have won the last 5 games in West Lafayette against the Boilers, but again, it does not seem like we're dealing with the same Northwestern team.
We do not know what may come of this game.
Yeah, we'll see. Iowa is the closest to controlling its own destiny if you assume an Illinois loss to Michigan. Again, is Illinois capable of beating Michigan? Of course they are, but it would seem like the deck is stacked against them. And if they were to lose that game and Iowa wins its next 2, then Iowa goes. Iowa back up off the mat here. I mean, it's really amazing to think about where they were 3 weeks ago and where they are now.
One word in my mind with Iowa, and it's not defense. Culture, culture, culture. You know, Kirk Ferentz has done a fabulous job there, and these kids believe that they're going to win. And I say that because they're winning. We know how they're winning with defense and special teams. I mean, offense, I'm not even going to go there. But
146 yards.
But let me tell you, I've been on teams like that have been one-sided one way or another, and there can become a little bit what I call friendly fire within the team. Geez, you know, guys, if we could just kick, score 10, if we could just do this, if we could do this. And that little bit of jabberings and distraction, they don't have that at Iowa. Because Kirk and the culture at Iowa will give this team a chance to win these last 2 games and go and be in the championship. That's all I see it.
This feels like it could be a bad matchup, though, against Minnesota. Because Minnesota is a team that I think defensively can handle what Iowa likes to do. They're a team that is going to want to eat up the clock. And for Iowa, I'm sure they're going to have answers for that run game, but this is not a Minnesota team that's going to try to throw the ball around the yard and let the guys in the back end get their hands on it. And, we watched Michigan, the success that they were able to have on the ground. I think that Mo Ibrahim is a guy who is able to have success based off of any of the fronts that are up against him. Like, this could be a game that gets a little sticky for the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Sure, Minnesota's really good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Really
when they're at their best, and these are two teams that come in playing really well. I mean, Iowa has won 3 in a row. Minnesota's won 3 in a row. The Hawks have won 7 straight in the series, by the way. But let's talk about Minnesota. Their path seems really challenging. Again, they need Purdue to lose, and then they need to win 2 tough games, Iowa and Wisconsin. So the path is difficult, but Minnesota's got to feel really good about where they are. It feels like they've solved some of the issues they had. We're still a little uncertain on quarterback, and are you going to be able to run the ball down the throat of Iowa in the way that you ran it down the throat of Northwestern? No way, right? I mean, they went over 300 yards. They need Cadillac Manis to throw it a whole lot. We don't know about Tanner Morgan, but still, Minnesota, same thing we said with Iowa, feeling a lot better than they were a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the culture here, too. P.J. Fleck's done a fabulous job. And, even though Tanner Morgan hasn't put up the big touchdown stats this year, that we thought, the key, the thing that's hurt them is him being hurt, but the turnovers, And so when I look at Minnesota and I say, how did you lose a couple of those games earlier? Forget about Tanner Morgan when he was hurt, just the turnovers of their football team. And now all of a sudden the defense had to play more plays and they weren't rested as much and they're kind of out of sync. That's not who they are. That's not their DNA. So they've got to control it. I mean, this is 2 teams. Let's be honest with each other. This is 2 teams that are looking each other in the mirror and saying, "Oh my God."
I recognize that guy.
I recognize that guy. I mean, right, it's defense, it's run the ball. And if Tanner Morgan's hurt, if he's hurt or not 100%, it's really defense and run the ball and special teams. Is
that like the Spider-Man meme or whatever it is?
Right.
I'm not sure if Coach is familiar with it. I keep going back to this, but I think if Cadillac Manis is a guy, he brings an element in terms of his legs that they need to really lean into. Minnesota needs to lean into the fact that he is a mobile quarterback. As much as they're downhill, pound the rock, we're going to mash you off the line of scrimmage. There's nothing like having that quarterback sneak out of there just to keep everything off kilter.
Good point.
So I think that is an edge in the game plan that they really need to lean into.
Also nice when you have a defense that's given up 16 points in 3 games.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Again, they feel like a long shot for Indy, just kind of the way that the deck is stacked against them, but they can still get to 10 wins. 8 Big Ten teams already going bowling, have 3 more in the hunt. Michigan State and Wisconsin needing just 1 more win, while Rutgers would need to win out to get to 6. Big Ten record is 10 bowl teams, set most recently last season. Let's start with Michigan State, Indiana, eminently winnable this week, and then Penn State after that need to take care of business on Saturday.
Yeah, Michigan State, Peyton Thorne, the quarterback, he has gotten better, as the year has gone on. So, I mean, I like Michigan State. I think, they got everything to play for. Forget about Penn State at this point. All they need is 1. They got Indiana. I like it. I like them.
That was the big deal, was winning this past weekend, too,
Yep.
so they could be in position to do just this. And this team probably needs a bowl game just in terms of morale and culture and building and the extra practices that they get that come along with that. So this is a big deal for Michigan State right now, especially considering what we thought they could be a couple weeks ago to continue to build momentum. And that's as important as anything.
Give them a ton of credit. I mean, they're 3-5 coming out of that Michigan game with all the suspensions, and then to go and play Illinois the way they did and win these last 2. It is awfully impressive. Again, a team that played the New Year's Six, as we know, a season ago. Wisconsin's in pretty good shape going to Nebraska this week, and then Minnesota needing 1. Probably this is the week to make sure you take care of it.
This is the one to get, particularly I'm not sure about Casey, the quarterback for Nebraska.
Right.
I think he's hurt. He may not play. And I tell you, last week's, it was a hurt. I mean, because that was a game Jim Leonard playing Iowa, 2 teams we kid about looking in the mirror and seeing similar teams. And they got beat. They got handled in that game. So this is a big bounce back. We're going to find out about Jim Leonard this game. This is going to be a game where he's going to have to get the team ready to go and go out there and win this game on the road.
Yeah, and on the Nebraska side of it, it's going to be a challenge for Wisconsin because this Nebraska team has shown fight.
Yep.
Whether or not they're going to win the football game is a completely different question. And we've seen a couple of times this year where this Wisconsin team didn't fully show up. But when they show up, they've been pretty good. So this is big just in terms of how a coach gets his team ready for a scrappy team, albeit they're not great, that could shock you if you let them.
Yeah, he doesn't want to take this into the last game and have to beat Minnesota.
No,
right?
especially because Minnesota has had some decent success against them here these last few years after Wisconsin has completely dominated the series for years. Rutgers in a tough spot. They need 2 wins. They have Penn State this week, so it does not seem all that likely, frankly, that they would get to 6. But
No,
what do you think of Greg Schiano's team here?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, offensively, I don't know how they're going to score enough points. Penn State, I got to say something. I mean, hats off to James Franklin. Yeah. I mean, I picked this game last week as one of the more competitive games in our conference, right? Maryland and Penn State. I'm sitting there watching this thing.
It wasn't competitive.
Right.
Someone made a bold prediction along those lines. That was what that expression was about.
Yeah, well,
that wasn't so good.
I'm watching that game, and I'll tell you what, like I say, and with young players on defense, Manny Diaz, hats off to him.
Hats off to him.
You know how hard it is to shut somebody out? I don't care who it is.
Shutouts are hard.
Coach, they're real hard.
How about a team that was in the top 4 in the Big Ten in scoring?
Yeah. Thank you. That's even harder.
Yeah. Shutouts are hard. I will say this about Rutgers. Gavin Wimsatt, and what I believe that he can be into the future, man, I think that kid is special. He needs to refine his game. He needs a little bit more touch. He needs to continue to learn. But the physical tools are ridiculous. And we saw the run game started to open up a little bit because you have the threat of a quarterback who can be dangerous running and passing. And now you're in a position to where, of course, you'd love to make a bowl, but let's say you don't. Recruiting's the most important thing now. I'm going out on the road, and I'm going to every wide receiver, and I'm like, look at this guy that we could have throwing you the football. Join us. Join us because we can build something special.
That was the biggest thing to me to come out of last weekend is for the first time you really saw through an entire game what he can be.
Yep.
And man, it is.
He's going to be a special
It's
one.
tantalizing, I would say, if you are a Rutgers fan. Saturday's Big Ten slate got 4 games in the early window. Illinois, Michigan. That's not quite the luster we thought it might. We've got Indiana and Michigan State. Spartans trying to wrap up a bowl game, as we mentioned. That is the battle for the old brass spittoon. Mid-afternoon window includes the Buckeyes, got Floyd of Rosedale, plus Penn State and Rutgers on our air. So lots to choose from. Wani, which game stands out to you?
Well, I'm going.
You're going with the mirror game?
I'm going Iowa and Minnesota. And I'll tell you what separates these two teams, there is something that separates them. They're not that identical. Right now, Minnesota is second in our conference in running the football. Iowa's like 13th at the bottom. So they have run the football obviously more successful. So that's going to be a big key. On the other side, defensively, is outstanding as Minnesota's been on defense. They don't make many sacks. They don't make many tackles for losses. They're kind of a bend but don't break defense, where Iowa, they're going to bring it and force it.
Iowa defense has been amazing. They've allowed more than 13 points one time.
That's amazing.
Here.
Amazing.
In this day and age of college football. What about for you, Joshua?
Yeah, I've got Illinois at Michigan, the game that we thought was going to have a little bit more to it. But this is kind of a mirror game, too, if you really start to boil it down. It's 2 teams that really want to get the game started on the ground. And Chase Brown and his health obviously have a big impact on that. For Illinois, it's 2 teams defensively that are built from a challenge you, create negative plays. Michigan, obviously, not the take the football away type of defense that Illinois is, but both 2 teams that adjust well at halftime historically. It's got a little bit of intrigue just from the fact that these teams feel like they mirror each other in a lot of ways. There's a lot of mirroring going on today.
A lot of mirror.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to think, right? Illinois has been the best scoring defense in the country for much of the year. Now Michigan is, so kind of along those lines. Really fascinated to see whether Chase Brown plays. And you were talking about that, Wani. He's such an integral part of what Illinois does. And if they're going to have any chance, it feels like they kind of need him.
Yeah, and he's probably not going to practice much, So the interesting thing, do they stay with the same plan and run it, throw it, play action with Tommy? Or do they say, hey, the only way we're going to score points is throw it more? Interesting little sideboard to keep an eye on.
That is interesting. And I said this before, but always felt like they needed to have more depth behind Chase Brown to spell him at least. And now you're in a situation where you may have to go to the depth. And I know they were banged up.
Josh McCray's been hurt.
Yeah,
I think that's been part of the issue.
But
right?
that's a tough spot.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, again, should be good this weekend. Always fun on a Tuesday. We'll be joined by Anthony Herron and Pat Forty tomorrow. We'll see you then.